Hi, everyone, and welcome to our monthly content analysis webinar. Great to be back here. As usual, we got lots of stuff that we're going to cover in terms of things we've seen in the last month, as well as what we saw in the last couple weeks. We were at KubeCon and clocked in, I think, over 60 official interviews with an additional 40 interviews that we'll be sharing next week. We asked folks from the ecosystem a couple of questions that we'll be asking our guests today. As usual, my name is Bart Farrell. I have the good fortune of running CubeFM on the podcast, most active leading Kubernetes podcast. And I'm joined by my colleague Amit, who's based in London. Amit, how are you doing? And for people who don't know you, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, doing well, thank you, Bart. Yeah, I'm good. I work with Bart on KubeFem on a number of our other brands. Generally work with sponsors and businesses in the Kubernetes space to better engage with the community. So yeah, nice to be here.
Very good. And our honored guest, who I saw recently in the United States, I think is currently in London, but will be heading to Vegas soon for reInvent, is Miguel Luna. Miguel, can you introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, folks. Yes, I'm Miguel Luna. I'm a principal product manager in Elastic, who has been working for some time in the cloud native space. Before I was with VMware. More recently, I've been with Elastic working on observability and very close to OpenTelemetry.
Very good. And we're going to be talking a lot more about observability and definitely OpenTelemetry today. So hang on to the interest in speaking about that topic more in detail, because we'll get to that. In terms of the format for today, as usual, we'll take a look at the topics that we analyze across all of our networks, and in terms of what trended the best, what got the highest number of impressions, also click-through rates, see what's the top engaging content, what we can extract from that for folks that are out there creating Kubernetes content about what kind of things they need to keep in mind. Recommendations, next steps, and then we'll be taking a closer look at what just happened in Atlanta and what we can expect in the coming months as we get closer to Amsterdam, because as we all know, as one KubeCon ends, another begins. That being said, Emmett, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, brilliant, thanks, Bart. Yeah, I think we'll fly through some of these topics and trends because a lot of the trends from last month have continued, but let's still go through those and give brands an idea of what's going on. And should mention, the data that we go through today has been collected from over 2 million impressions that go out across our network every month. And let's go through some of the top categories. So, really similar scenario, I think, within the top 3 especially, although the click-through rate seems to be a bit lower from a data on Kubernetes, resource optimization and configuration management perspective. They're all getting a lot of eyeballs, which is great, but perhaps there's a bit of content saturation within some of these categories, which, let's dive into that a little bit more. So from October's click-through rate, observability has been super high. Infrastructure, there's been an abundance of content. Good, but not necessarily always good, and we'll touch on that in a second. The average impressions per piece, so the greatest engagement per piece, so to say, is on data on Kubernetes, which is a similar story, if I remember correctly, to the previous one as well. Resource optimization is always up there. There's so much we can say about that month on month, but yeah, let's dive in deeper into a couple of these. Should we start with observability, I think? Great, so yeah, observability has the highest click-through rate, has done very well over the, I suppose, last few months in terms of click-through rate as well. Any reasons, guys? I mean, Bart, you've interviewed, I think, over probably 80 people over the last couple of months, and Miguel, you kind of live and breathe this space as well. What do you guys think? Is there any trends or topics that you think are being particularly covered within this category?
I would like to hear what Miguel's thoughts are about this, since it's something you're looking at day in and day out. What is it about? We've seen other topics such as Amit mentioned, resource management, data on Kubernetes, security, observability still been there. We had Hendrik Rext on here a couple months ago talking about observability. But what are the things that you think people are still focused on, what they're interested in, what they want to learn more about, Miguel?
Sure. So I think this is very natural. Basically, this reflects how painful telemetry remains. So the costs are spiking, tool sprawl is out of control, and if you consider, like, many companies if not like almost every company has kind of like some half broken observability stack with missing signals, or they have different tools that they need to rely on. So the complexity keeps increasing, especially like Kubernetes has added a new layer of complexity, more data keeps coming in, and the teams are shrinking, which is kind of like a reflection also of the current economics. So anything that helps these teams to reduce noise, simplify data collection is going to get attention, or anything that also helps them to cut costs by either ingesting less data or simplifying or unifying tools. So this is not surprising for me that observability content is getting so much attention.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah,
So do you think it's sorry, Bart?
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Do you think that's have you seen this consistently throughout the year? I mean, we're getting towards the end of the year when people perhaps slowing down. Do you think is there certain trends that you see from January through to December, or is that being fairly consistent from your side?
So usually you might be able, like, it also depends when the team's budgets start coming, when the company's budgets start coming into like their fiscal year. So many times you're gonna see that when the new budgets get approved, then that's the timing where many companies are gonna start thinking about, okay, how are we gonna allocate our observability budget this year, and how are we going, what can we do to improve? Because that's the timing where they are thinking, okay, this is a new opportunity for us to refresh. This is a new opportunity for us to improve and to invest more in certain areas that can reduce the pain. So I wouldn't say that it's going to be all around the year, but you'll have certain peaks on. Also, there will be other times where contracts come to an end and they say, okay, do we stay on the same? Do we move out? Like OpenTelemetry being a very, very good alternative for many folks that they're looking. They say, okay, if we stay with the same, we avoid the pain of migration, re-instrumenting everything. If we move to another vendor, we're gonna have to do it. What if I tell you that you only needed to do it one more time? Is a very appetizing proposal for many folks. So that also could drive some of the spikes that you might be able to see.
Very good. And with spikes being one thing, but also, in terms of people that we've been talking to, when asking people about if they have a blank Kubernetes cluster, what's the first tool that they're going to install? A lot of people came back with saying, something, monitoring observability stack. Some people might say Prometheus, other people might say Grafana, other people might say Victoria Metrics. People have their tool of choice, but a lot of people, without any hesitation whatsoever, mention that. Is this something that you see that SREs, DevOps folks just simply can't live without?
Oh, absolutely, because basically, like otherwise you're signing a blank check out there, like you're provisioning infrastructure to other folks to use, and you want to make sure first of all that infrastructure is healthy, that is being used reasonably. So you want to understand, like, am I over provisioning these clusters? Am I kind of like wasting resources here on one side, on the cost side, but also at the same time, are these things healthy? Are they usable? Because otherwise you might think that you're doing it all and you have the clusters out there, and all of a sudden at the end of the day what matters is what your users are able to get. So if your users are getting like low latency, they're getting problems, at the end of the day infrastructure is not going to matter. If everything is fine and is up and running, then you start looking into costs. But if nothing is good and is not working, then you want to have that telemetry. So I wouldn't, as an SRE, like, I don't think that many SREs are willing to just give out something as a service and then not have visibility into what is happening with that infrastructure that they are provisioning for someone else.
Fantastic. Amit, should we keep going on the slides?
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right.
Infrastructure. So this one, just infrastructure does consistently crop up. But even though there's a high number of impressions there, even though it's getting a lot of views, you can see that the actual average impressions per piece is relatively low, despite a fairly respectable click-through rate. It might just show that actually, whilst it's getting a lot of of impressions, as we're getting a lot of eyeballs, the number of pieces of content will be quite high. And so, what content marketers might find is if you are looking to address this category, it might be quite a competitive space to do so. So, maybe working on a brilliant piece of content, but, it might be quite difficult to drive eyeballs to it. So something that we've seen done well is kind of a cross-pollination of different categories. So you might want to look at infrastructure cross with a number of different categories, or you may want to look at it from not just a straight content perspective, but look at it from a tool perspective, or look at it from a walkthrough, or even something that's still relatively popular is looking through a walkthrough case study of where your product or whatever it might be has worked in situ with a client and actually go through technical run through of how that worked as well. So definitely invest in infrastructure content, just be wary in terms of how that placement works. And, don't too surprised if you don't do something a little bit different, that you don't get the eyeballs that you might not want. Highest click-through, I kind of said this just now really, and it was the same again last month. Tool-based content continues to massively outperform other content areas by a real clear margin. And followed by case studies and walkthroughs, as I just mentioned with the infrastructure content, to try these different delivery methods in terms of getting the word and getting either your product or the actual technology out there. Definitely try tools, because the community seems to be really lacking up at the moment.
I think this one tracks very much with what I have been saying, which is teams are flooded with theory and vendor narratives everywhere. I mean, you can find them easily, but they have moved to, like, they are solving real problems. So they will bookmark anything that is a tool solving a real problem, right? Because these practitioners are now in execution mode. They're not in strategy mode. It's shifted from show me how to do it into show me how to do it from tell me why it matters. Like, that aspect is solved. Now people are in execution mode and they're looking for someone to show them how to do it.
It's also like the education awareness piece has been and gone. People get it, people know they need to do it, and that's okay. Show me how to do it.
Exactly.
Solid.
Brilliant. Bart, over to you, key trends and insights.
Yep. Yep. So we saw, we've seen time and time again data on Kubernetes come back. More and more people running stateful workloads, still challenges around doing that. And as we just said, it's not just, in the past, there was we can say the sort of paradigmatic shift around, is Kubernetes even safe for running stateful workloads? It seems like that's now kind of a done deal. But now it's like, okay, if I got to do this, now I need to know how. And different, storage systems are different databases are different. If we're also talking about streaming workloads, we're talking about AI and ML workloads making their way onto Kubernetes more and more often. It's only natural that there's demand for that content. And looking at, as we talked about observability, we're going to dig into that more in terms of the things that people are seeing there. One thing I'd like to touch on that too, Miguel, is that something we often hear about in terms of observability monitoring. We hear about tooling sprawl and dashboards for dashboards and things of that nature. Do you feel like we are seeing the end of tooling sprawl and that things are getting more under control? Or do you think that and also particularly, as you said, if teams are getting smaller and smaller, perhaps conversations need to be held around from a financial perspective of we can't have too many tools, or we need to simplify the tools that we're using. In your experience, what's the best way to address tooling sprawl?
So there is, first of all, it's very important to have what is the use case that you're trying to address. So many times we've been kind of like looking at the so-called 3 pillars of observability and having the 3 signals, and it's like you're only doing observability if you're having the 3 signals. So you have the logs, the metrics, the traces. Sometimes maybe you don't need them all. The best signal is the one that you already have instrumented. So you might want to consider how deep you want to go into each of them. And that means as well, like, how specialized the tools that you're using for one of the signals need to be depending on your use case. So if you're talking about, for example, like mixing security with observability, if we're talking about activity logs, of course, it's very important that you analyze and you get alerts for any of the rules that are going to compromise your assets to get alerted immediately. But if you're talking about some other logs that are more that require less frequency, that requires not a first-class citizen treatment, then potentially you could go into a tool that specializes, for example, in the areas where you really want to do and has a good enough experience for the other signals that don't necessarily you need like first-class citizen treatment, and that will enable you to focus on those mission critical aspects that are going to make your business successful. So yeah, that's generic my advice. The other thing as well is touching back again on OTel, not to sound like a broken record, but when you start to consider the addition of anything that is an open standard, this will eventually reduce the pain and the sprawl that you have when you have more interoperability between different tools. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to lock, you want to decouple the tool from your models. So from your data models, that telemetry that you are emitting doesn't need to be tightly coupled with the tool. So this would enable you to be a little bit more portable into which tools you need. In fact, like, if you have, for example, an hotel collector, you can decide that you want to send the same telemetry to two different backends, and that's possible. So you can do that, and then at one point you might decide that you want to turn on one for some time because you have some mission, it's Black Friday today, which actually I think it is tomorrow, and then all of a sudden you have some mission critical apps that you need to track. Then you might want to turn on the floodgates and the expenditure in observability because nothing can go wrong in this week, right? But eventually you don't want to keep that expenditure there. So those are the options that you get when you start embracing the open standards and starting to go with things that are more across the board for all the different signals.
Very good point, and I'm glad you mentioned it, and it's our fault for not mentioning it either. We are talking about this on Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to folks who celebrate that. With Black Friday just around the corner, thinking about over provisioning, infrastructure, all the stuff that people are going to be going through tomorrow, all the people that are going to be looking at a lot of different observability tools to see what's going on, particularly in the e-commerce world, as everybody goes nuts shopping, as well as Cyber Monday next week on Monday. So people have plenty of work to do coming up when it comes to observability. With things that we want to be thinking about next is that like I said, we see data on Kubernetes time and time again. In terms of all the content coming out, it's normal that we saw a lot of stuff around podcasting getting so close to KubeCon, and we'll talk about that in a second. And as you mentioned, Miguel, very rightfully so, that there is still plenty of demand for observability content. And one of the things I want to talk about with that, looking at KubeCon Atlanta, all the different people that we talked to, observability is a topic that came up time and time again. And also looking at, in terms of some of the reports that came out about, projects in the CNCF, I'd known for quite some time because of people in the observability space that, after Kubernetes, OpenTelemetry is the project with the second highest number of contributors. I think now Cilium may have taken over, but it's interesting as well too that Cilium is a very strong observability component alongside networking and security. We also mentioned those overlaps there too. So we see that people are motivated, to contribute. End user adoption is very strong in the cases of both projects. In your particular case, talking to end users that are out there, a lot of times people might struggle with the idea of like, oh, we're going to use an open source project for that. When you're having conversations with organizations that are evaluating where to take things, and they're considering something like OTel, what are the points that you're bringing up that you often find are of most interest?
So I think that people like the interesting aspects is that people are sold on the agnosticity. That's kind of like where do I sign? Like take my money. That's well, not that you're gonna pay money because it's open source, but
We'll take your money. Don't worry.
but basically, like people are sold on that aspect of vendor agnosticity. Then when it comes to using something that is open source, they really engage with the model of distributions that the OpenTelemetry project has. For example, for the collector, one thing that particularly resonates is when we talk about Kubernetes, many times people talk about vanilla, and then that implies that every vendor has its own flavor. But the truth in the distributions is that ideally there are no flavors. You're just putting together cherry picking the components. And when you do that, then you bring to the table one of the things that people care about, which is supportability, because they love the community, they love everything that gets delivered by the community, but of course the community cannot support an enterprise user, for example, and they want the best of both worlds. So that's when some of the vendors put together distributions and say, okay, we're going to test these components working together, and we're going to give you SLA grade level support. Then that really resonates with them, and they go, okay, so you're hardening the images, you're making sure that these components are tested, and if anything goes wrong, now I know who to ring. That is what resonates when you're using these open source projects, especially with enterprise users.
Very well said. And sorry, just to take that a little bit further, in terms of your insights from KubeCon, first of all, how many AI conversations did you have? And more importantly, were any of them actually interesting?
I think someone on LinkedIn said like a topic, create a post about like the 2 KubeCons, and I do believe that there were 2 KubeCons. Like on the ground, the number of AI conversations there were many around NCP. As you can see, probably like I'm into NCP, but why? Because we finally arrived to something that is more tangible, and people can see working apart from just kind of like copy pasting, some context and throwing it to an LLM. So there were some conversation about the agents and how you can build some agents, but I still think that the majority of the conversations were more about people will still want to solve those real those other problems. And like sometimes it's like, oh, I'm ingesting this data. How do I remove PII? Like that was a conversation that I saw like 2, 3 or 4 times, and people just they don't want to expose themselves to the risk of personal data being leaked or all this sort of stuff. That, for example, as you know, in Europe, the GDPR regulations are very strict, and the backlash of breaking one of them could have very big consequences. So those are the topics that also I saw. Like I saw some other topics around infrastructure as well, observability. How do I reduce costs? How do I want to basically ingest the minimal number of data that I have to. But I still want to get insights. So those are the topics that I saw on top of AI. But AI was there, but it wasn't as prominent as one would expect when you start seeing when you see the marketing versus when you see the practitioners talking about.
Very, very strong points. One thing I wanted to touch on here too, Miguel, before we wrap up, we got a chance to talk to Kelsey Hightower. It was actually my first time interviewing him since being involved in the Kubernetes ecosystem. And, we asked him if he had a blank cluster, what would be the first tool that he would install? And he mentioned Prometheus. So I think it's, kind of interesting that we're talking about, the aspect of observability and looking at metrics, monitoring, etc. And then the other thing that he mentioned was we asked everybody about their least favorite and favorite Kubernetes feature. And he said both that his favorite and least favorite features of Kubernetes were CRDs, custom resource definitions. And he said the best part and the worst part is that it gives you the freedom to do things in the way that you want to, but that also comes along with a certain risk. How would you respond to that? First of all, that someone who's spoken a lot about Kubernetes and a lot about tooling, automatic first response is Prometheus, and then this aspect of CRDs. Where do you stand on that?
So he said that he is the one that he least like, or he also love and also
both that he likes the most.
Okay.
His favorite and least favorite features are CRDs,
all right.
And that if he had to install a tool on a blank Kubernetes cluster, that would be Prometheus.
Okay, So yes, Prometheus, like we talked extensively about observability, so I'm not surprised. Um, in the yeah on CRDs is a very interesting topic because I love the declarative aspects of CRDs, but this also opens a world of introducing custom controllers when you kind of like you're leveraging the operating pattern that could it could open a world of doing like all sorts of different and crazy things that don't necessarily are going to align with the intent that you want to have when you have Kubernetes. So yeah, like when you're introducing a custom controller and a custom CRD, that a custom resource, then that's kind of like you're opening the door for the extensibility to go like wherever it will take us, and that's potentially why I don't know I didn't speak directly with Kelsey this time, but I'm pretty sure that that's potentially this could be one of the angles that he was thinking of.
Fantastic. Well, I hope you get to have a conversation with him about that because it'd be very useful. I'm sure an interesting one between the two of you. In terms of other things we did in Amsterdam, we did a lot of things in Amsterdam, as Amit mentioned, in terms of the amount of interviews we did. We also got to interact with brands at their booths doing trivia through a thing we called the YAML Games, which is a lot of fun, which we'll definitely be bringing back online prior to the next KubeCon. Emmett, what else do we have in store for Amsterdam?
Yeah, I think we've like you mentioned we got YAML Games. I think that was a great success for the brands that participated, and we're super excited to do that online and in person in Amsterdam. And then the many interviews that Bart races around the floor and does and ensures that all these brands get their stories out, get their technical knowledge out, their announcements out. That'll definitely be happening. We hopefully will be working with another brand to bring a Day Zero workshop to Amsterdam, which we did in Atlanta and got brilliant feedback from. And it's a great value add for people, engineers, the community who are there on Day Zero and looking for something valuable to do with their time. And what else have I missed? What else have I missed? I think there's probably a long list, but I probably shouldn't bore everyone with this full list. Get in touch if you want to know more, I should say.
Exactly. We're accessible. We're happy to speak. It's never too late to start making plans for, March of 2026, which is just around the corner when you consider, holidays coming up. Basically, we're already finishing November, but it feels like we're rolling into January. Miguel, you're going to be traveling to reInvent next. What are your plans for that? And what else is on your radar that we should keep in mind?
Ooh, that's interesting. It is the first time I'm going to be at reInvent. Like I've been like 7 times to KubeCon. So reInvent, I know that it's a different beast. So for now, I'm keeping a little bit of an open mind. I am meeting a few people in there. So I'm actually like, the question will be for reInvent, like what do they have planned for me? In terms of like what I'm keeping on my mind is anything like what we have touched on all the trends is about things that are actionable and things that are for practitioners that are in execution mode. I want to see some of those things. I want to see tangible and things that are happening and understand like how we can incorporate any of these things into the products that we are creating to make sure that we make the lives of people much easier. Another thing that I am keeping in mind, and probably more for Amsterdam for KubeCon, is I want to see you jamming again, man. I want to see you on the drums.
Not a problem. I've got some right next to me. Cube Jam was a blast. That was a lot of fun. And it's a wonderful way for people from lots of different countries to get together and have a really good time playing music. So yeah, Amit, I hope you will be practicing something to play in Amsterdam. I expect a very...
The ukulele as we speak.
And the ukulele. Good. A ukulele solo.
Don't hold me to that.
But anyway, you can count on that. You can count on a lot of things. Miguel, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you. If folks haven't checked out Miguel's podcast episode that he did with us, I think it was about a year or so ago. It still is very relevant today. A bird watcher's perspective on observability, which I really, really enjoyed our conversation. Very much enjoy it today too. Look forward to hearing about how reInvent went. I hope you get lots of sleep on the plane because I don't imagine how much you'll be getting during the busyness and craziness intensity of reInvent. But yeah, hopefully we'll see you in London at some point, if not in Spain, and take care and be well.
All right. Thank you, folks.
Cheers, guys.
Have a good one. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.